On Tisha B'Av, we're all aware that our focus is on the Churban Beis HaMikdash. What we need to understand is that our mourning is not only on the Churban Beis HaMikdash, but all the tzaros that we have in Klal Yisrael is an offshoot because of the Churban. Had we have the Beis HaMikdash, all the pain, and everyone Lefi Madrigasa, everyone knows their own pain, or a family member, or a friend, that's all an offshoot because we don't have the bias. We say at a Levi, the pasuk in Yeshayahu, the pasuk says, "Umacha Hashem dimma mi'al kol panim," that Hashem will wipe away the tears from our faces. When will there be no more tears in the world, Rabbi Sai? When? And this will be when we have the Beis HaMikdash. And it's rebuilt and all our suffering will disappear. We always daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Yeshuas. Everybody wants good things. If we just put all our effort and really want the rebuilding of the temple of the Beis HaMikdash, and it would come, all our suffering will disappear. The Gemara Tainis, the Aflamin Beis, the Gemara tells us, "Kol Mesabel Yerushalayim, Zoicha v'Roya b'Simchasa." Whoever mourns the Beis HaMikdash will be Zoicha to see Simcha. And whoever does not mourn the Beis HaMikdash, Einoi Roya b'Simchasa, will not be Zoicha to see the Simcha. What does that mean? You'll be Zoicha to see Simcha. Says the Ritva something fascinating. There'll be two parts of Tchias HaMeisim. We all know Tchias HaMeisim. Mashiach comes, the revival of the dead. There'll be two parts of Tchias HaMeisim. One part will be there are those who have Tchias HaMeisim at the time of the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. It's brought down that will be a tremendous simcha to see the actual rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. Just to bring it into perspective, when someone's building a house, if someone's building a building, every day they go down there and they want to see what's going on. Put the foundation in, you put the beams in, the guy feels good. Could you imagine if we able to see the building of the Beis HaMikdash when we know it's a temple where all our tzaros will disappear? To have the schus to see that, that's only if you mourn on the Beis HaMikdash. The second Tchias HaMeisim will be those, you have good Jews, good people. You daven, you learn, you do chesed. They'll have Tchias HaMeisim after the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt. Which is a fascinating thing. You can have somebody who gives tzedakah. He learns Torah. He's a chashuv person. He'll have Tchias HaMeisim. But he won't see the rebuilding of the actual temple. For that, you have to mourn and feel a little bit for the Beis HaMikdash. The question is, how do we mourn for the Beis HaMikdash? How do we feel it? It's something that was so long ago. How do we feel it? What are we doing? And the Meiri says that kinnis, fasting is not enough. Because the mourning is in the heart, and one can fulfill all the halachas properly. But if you don't feel it, it's not enough. You have to feel it. And Rabbi Aaron Kotler told us that the integral part of mourning is all but lost. So if Rabbi Aaron Kotler told us the integral part is all but lost, how are we, that was 60 years ago, how are we now supposed to feel it? How can we work on ourselves to feel a little bit of destruction? It was so long ago, what could we do? Like we explained earlier, that can possibly be a way for us to feel it. All the tzaros that we have is because we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. If we're able to feel our tzaros and say, I don't want tzaros anymore. How do I take it away? By having the Beis HaMikdash. Being that we don't have the temple, that's where we have problems. If we're able to take our tzaros, and everybody feels their tzaros, and so to speak, channel that. It's because we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. There might be a way that we're able to feel the loss. The Medrash relates a story with Rabbi Gamliel. The great Rabbi Gamliel, he had a neighbor who lived next to him, and unfortunately she lost her child, a young child. And it's brought down that every night this woman would cry for the loss of her child. And Rabbi Gamliel would hear the woman cry, and the Medrash tells us that would remind him, or when he heard her cry, he would think of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, and he would now cry for the Beis HaMikdash, because he heard her crying. The obvious two questions are, the Medrash says that Rabbi Gamliel was crying with her. If it says that he heard her cry and he was crying for the Churban, how was he crying with her? She's crying for her child, and he heard her cry and he's crying for the Churban. What do you mean he's crying with her? And number two, the great Rabbi Gamliel needed to hear his next door neighbor cry for a child to remind him of the Churban Beis HaMikdash? Wasn't it part of him? If it wasn't part of him, how's it part of us? And the answer is, based on what we said earlier, the pshat is pashut. Rabbi Gamliel understood all that befalls Klal Yisrael is because of the Churban. And that was the source of the tragic passing of her son. The source of the tragic passing of her son was because we don't have the temple. We don't have the Beis HaMikdash. And that's why she had her tzara. And Rabbi Gamliel understood that everyone's private suffering is a continuation of the Churban. Therefore, he was indeed crying with her, because he understood that her loss was a product of the Churban. Unfortunately, we all know painful events that happened. Personal, not personal. We all can relate to tzaras, unfortunately. And all these tzaras are because of the Churban. If we could just feel the pain, our own tzaras, and put it into the Churban, that's a way we could actually mourn for the Churban. The story goes, somebody comes to Rav Shach and says one of the biggest losses in history was the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were killed. It was one other time in history where maybe that many were died. He said, Rabbi, why don't we make a day of mourning? 6 million Jews were nifter. Let's make a day of mourning. And Rav Shach told him, we already have a day of mourning for the Holocaust, and that's called Tisha B'Av. What was Rav Shach saying? He's saying our nikud over here. That all our tzarot, they all come because we don't have the Churban, because we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. And Rav Shach said, we already have a day of mourning. What's that day? Tisha B'Av. Had we had the Beis HaMikdash, we wouldn't have any of these problems. That's what Rav Shach was saying. The pasuk in Ezra, the pasuk tells us, V'rabim ha'kohanim ha'lavim ha'avois hazkedim asher ro'es habayis rishon biyostoi zeh habayis beineim boichim b'kol gadol v'rabim b'trua b'simchol haram b'koil. The pasuk tells us when the second temple was rebuilt, when the second Beis HaMikdash was rebuilt, the elders of Am Yisrael were crying. But the youngsters, b'simchol haram b'koil, they were excited. They were excited for the second Beis HaMikdash. And the obvious question is, the second Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt. Why the elders of Klal Yisrael are crying? And why the youngsters excited? Isn't it a monumentous event? The temple's here. Everyone should be excited. And Rashi explains that the elders of Klal Yisrael knew the glory of the first Beis HaMikdash. They knew what the second one was missing. And that's why they were crying. But the younger generation, they didn't see the first Beis HaMikdash, so they had tremendous simcha by the second one. And that's why they were happy. And that's why they weren't crying. Just to show how much we're missing. The Gemara tells us, and we know this, unfortunately, Avelim, every day people die. Every day people die. But if you look, the Gemara gives us an allotted time for Avelos. How long is one allowed to mourn? So we know someone dies, Rahman al-Tzan, what happens? The Gemara tells us for 3 days, you cry. We have 7 days. Other 5 days, you talk about the nifter. Then you have shloishim, haircuts, so on and so forth. Then you have the year. But the Gemara goes through a lot of time. But if you realize, the Gemara does not give us an allotted time how long we may mourn for the Churban Beis HaMikdash. That the Gemara doesn't tell us. If you look at the Rambam tells us in Hilchas Avelis, Perek Gimel Al Chilal, the Rambam says, Al Yiskasha Adam Al Meisu Yosim Idai. A person should not mourn for someone that was nifter for such a long time. Shenemar, it says, Al Tivku Lemeis Koloima Yosim Idai Mishun Zel Minig HaOlam. The Minig HaOlam is people die. Therefore, you can't overly cry. You could cry, but there's not a lot of time. And listen to the words of the Rambam. If somebody is mitzar himself more than he's supposed to on a minig ha'olam, says the Rambam, hareze tipish. It's the Rambam, it's not me. If somebody cries more than he's supposed to, hareze tipish. There's not a lot of time. Minig ha'olam is people die. Yes, it's painful. You cry. You got to move on in life. But the Rambam doesn't say anything about Churban Bayis. When he's going through Avelis, he doesn't give it a lot of time for Churban. Why? Because there's no a lot of time for Churban Bayis. It's not minig ha'olam. It's something that should not have happened. Again, the Rambam told us minig ha'olam, there's a certain amount you could cry. But he doesn't mention Churban Bayis, because Churban Bayis is something that should not have happened. It's not minig ha'olam. And that's why there's no a lot of time for that. And there's no shear. It's never enough. We can always cry for the Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara Tainis Daf Chavtes, the Gemara tells us, Rabbi Yochanan, everyone knows the Gemara. The Gemara tells us, Rabbi Yochanan said, Mali hayisi be'ayisa ador lo kavati vela ba'asiri. Had I been in the generation when they were misakin, went to fast, I would have made it on the 10th, not on the 9th. Why? Because on the 10th, that's when most of the burning happened. So if most of the burning happened, said Rabbi Yochanan, you should fast on the 10th. But Chazal made it on the 9th. Why did he make it on the 9th? Because Chazal said, if we wouldn't have the beginning, then we wouldn't have the 10th. So the Ikr morning, he says the 9th. Had we not had the Aschala of the burning on the 9th, then we wouldn't have it on the 10th. So that's why we're masakin, to have it on the 9th. But the Rishalmi tells us that there were Gedolei Yisrael who fasted for 2 days. There were Gedolei Yisrael who fasted for 2 days and asks the Ramban, isn't that Baal Tosef? Everyone knows what Baal Tosef is? The Torah tells us, shake lulav. If you shake lulav now, what are you doing? You shake it for 7 days, and the day after you have, it's Baal Tosef. No matter how much you feel. You want to sit in the sukkah an extra day, it's Baal Tosef. So ask the Ramban, the Rishalmi tells the Gedolei Yisrael who fasted for 2 days, isn't that Baal Tosef? Chazal told that you only fast for 1 day on the 9th. Why did they fast for 2 days? You know what the answer is? Because there's no sheer to mourning for the Churban Bayis. There's no allotted time. Like we said from the Gemara and we said from the Rambam, there's no allotted time. Crying for the Churban, you could always and always cry for it. It was the biggest tragedy in history. And that's why it's not Baal Tosef. Someone once asked the Brisker of, why by a mace do we say, Einam is abel al mace yosem idai? You may not cry on a mace more than you're supposed to. But by the Beis HaMikdash, there's no shear. And the Brisker of answered, by a mace, the matzav is the same. The person's not here, unfortunately. He's not here today. He's not here tomorrow. It's the same status. But every day we don't have that Beis HaMikdash, he says, that's another Churban. And that's another Churban. And that's why there's no sheer, said the Brisker of, to crying for the Churban. Because there's no sheer. Every day there's another tragedy. And the Rishalmi tells us, Kol dar shalei bana Beis HaMikdash biyamav kinecha biyamav. Every generation at the Beis HaMikdash, it was not rebuilt in our generation. It's like it was destroyed in our generation. Rabbi Sai, it was destroyed in our generation. Do you see a fire? What does Rishalmi mean? And the answer is, because every day we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. Unfortunately, we're falling off more and more. And that alone is a Churban. The Golus becomes magnified. And that's the Pshat Kilu Nechra B'Yamav. What does it mean? Kol Dor, V'Dor, Shalei Bona Beis HaMikdash B'Yamav, Kinecha B'Yamav? That means the Golus becomes magnified. And you don't need me to say this. There are people here a lot older than me. There's so many things, unfortunately, that people would never have done, even 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Or better yet, there's so many things people just talk about in the open, and they'll be embarrassed to talk about it. And today they just talk about it like it's nothing. It's fine. The facts are we get desensitized to things. And Yidden are doing things, unfortunately, but Derech Chali would never do. Not because we're bad, because we just get desensitized. We live in a world where everything becomes mutter. And the fact is that it has ashpa on us. It has an effect on us. Just to end off, when the Rabbi Yehuda was nifter, so his Talmud was saying over at Hesped, and he said over that the Rabbi Yehuda, from Shavasa B'Tamaz and on, he didn't eat anything that had life to it. Whether it's fish, whether it's meat, we only do Shvuah Shechalbai. We do 9 days, it's found in Shvuah Shechalbai. So Shavasa B'Tamaz and on, anything alive he didn't eat. When the 9 days came, the Rabbi Yehuda, all he ate was dry bread with ashes for 9 days. He wants to feel the churban a little bit, so he has to work on himself. And he wouldn't pass Chatzos Halayla without crying for the churban. And he started Kinnis Erev Tisha B'Av. And he used to roll on the dust outside the shul. The night of Yehuda. And people would see him rolling on the dust and he was crying. He didn't care about the covet. He didn't care about people looking at him. This was real. He was crying. He felt the churban. They saw him outside rolling in the dust. And the Shiva Kfar Hasidim said over that Haga used to be in Yerushalayim. Then the 9 days, nobody even said Shalom Aleichem. No one said hello because they felt the mourning a little bit. Says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, we try to ask ourselves, what is the length of this gullus? Everybody asks that. Problem is, most of us only ask when something bad happens. Oh, when's Mashiach coming? Oh. It's not a daily thing. Hashem's got to throw that little pebble. We get the pebble, it hits us in the face. We need Mashiach. When everything's going good, we don't even think about it. We're scared what's going to be with our car, with our house. Is it going to come with us? Not going to come with us? All these different things. He says, we try to ask ourselves, what is the length of our gullus? And he says, you don't have to search for artificial reasons. The fact that we're not misabel for the Beis HaMikdash, that alone is enough of a reason for the gullus. The fact that we're not misabel, that alone is enough of a reason for the length of our gullus. Let us try to feel it. And says the Lev Eliyahu that when he was a young boy, he went into shul during the 3 weeks. And he went into shul, he went to Beis Medrash 3 o'clock in the morning. You know what he saw? People were there crying by taking chatzos. You know who was there? Not Rosh Yeshivas, not Rabbanim. Could be they were at home crying. But he said in the Beis Medrash, you know who was in the shul crying? Carpenters, shoemakers, tailors. They were crying. They felt the churban. And he said that made a tremendous roshim on me. And the Chassam Sofer, Erev Tisha B'Av, you know what he did? His Gabbai said over, Chassam Sofer will lock himself in a room, Erev Tisha B'Av, and he wanted to know, what is the Chassam Sofer doing, Erev Tisha B'Av, in his room? What is he doing? And he found a little crack in the door, and he looks inside, and he sees in his one hand he has a sefer, and his left hand he has a cup, and he's collecting his tears from crying for the churban. He has a cup and he's collecting his tears from crying for the churban. That's what the Heilig Chassam Sofer did Erev Tisha B'Av. And he said over that by the Sudas HaMafsekes he would dip in his bread into the tears and he would eat the bread with his demise. That's how he would prepare for Tisha B'Av. He would feel it. It was real. That's what the Chassam Sofer did. And when people came to him taking chatzos with problems, he would pour a little bit of that tears wherever they had pain, and they would have a refuah right away on that place with his tears. Churban Beis HaMikdash, running out of time. But how do we feel the churban? If we could just take all that tzaras that we have, unfortunately, Everybody has a tzara. Kifi madrigosai. If we look what's going on in the world, so much going on. Look at ourselves. Look at our family members. People have so many problems, unfortunately. If we think about it, and we believe that this is all because we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. If we stop for a second, we'll be able to feel it. We don't have the Beis HaMikdash, and that's where we have tzaras. I don't want tzaras anymore. Hashem, please bring the Beis HaMikdash back. And the schus that we'll be able to mourn for the Beis HaMikdash. Even a little bit we have to mourn, to feel a little bit. We'll be zoicha to that first Tchias HaMeisim. We'll be zoicha that we'll have no more tzaras in our lives anymore. And we'll be able to be Mekal Mashiach Tzidkenu, which we really want. Amen. Amen.
Amen.